So, a few years ago, I was talking to somebody about my recent experiences in a sensory deprivation tank. And if you're not familiar with this, it's a tank of water that's around the same temperature as your skin, that's filled with hundreds of pounds of salt, that's so salinated that you literally float on the water. And along with that, it's very dark and you pretty much can't hear anything. So, all of those things combined deprive you of your senses, which essentially just leaves you with your thoughts. You're just sitting there with your thoughts. I mean, if you really relax and really let go, after a couple minutes, it feels like you're just floating in space and all you're doing is thinking. So I told this person about it, and their reaction was one I didn't expect. I thought I was going to tell them about this. They're going to be like, oh, this is awesome. Can we go? Like, can we go to a sensory deprivation tank? I want to try this out. Instead, they were horrified. It's like I showed them like a haunted house or something. They couldn't believe that I would not, one, that I would go in this thing, but that two, I would pay for it. So they were completely blown away, and they themselves said, I have no desire to go in one of those. I don't want to go in one, and I'm definitely not paying for it. Now, at the time, I was completely lost. I was like, how can you be scared of your own thoughts? Like, that's all that's going to happen. You're just going to go in there. You're going to have thoughts. Why would you be scared of that? Now, I still disagree with them not going in it, but I'm a little bit more sympathetic to the fact that people might be scared of their thoughts. The reason for this is because about a year and a half ago, I was doing an episode of my podcast. I didn't really have a topic for that week, but I was in the gym one day listening to the Joe Rogan Experience, and he had this guy, Justin Wren, on. And Justin Wren talked about being bullied when he was growing up. He had these really horrific stories from his childhood, and I found myself relating to it. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about my experiences getting bullied growing up, and that'll be my topic for the week. So I did. And specifically, I talked about this time in school where I got ganged up by two girls. They beat the shit out of me. It was super embarrassing, obviously, because you're like a teenage boy, not even a teenager. I think I was like 11 or 12 at the time. And you get your ass kicked by girls. Everybody in the school knows it. Obviously, not the best experience you could ever have, but little did I know, I would get emotional really quick. It wasn't until I recorded that episode and published that episode that I'd realize how infrequently I'd visited that life experience. And it wasn't until listening to somebody like Jordan Peterson that really helped solidify how to view life experiences and emotions from our past. He says, if you have a memory that is more than 18 months old, and when you pull that memory up to mind and you still have an emotional reaction, that means you haven't fully articulated that memory. You haven't analyzed it causally. You haven't freed yourself from its grasp, and you're carrying it around like a weight. The more weight you're carrying, the more baggage, the more of the stress hormone cortisol your brain produces, and cortisol makes you old. Now, Jordan Peterson says if it's a memory more than 18 months old, that memory was like 2 decades old, and I got emotional. That's how infrequently I'd visited that experience. That was something that happened to me. It was traumatizing. It was horrible. And I think being an 11, 12-year-old boy, I just like ran. I just pretend this never happened. Go, 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 go. And then 20 years later, I'm like, yeah, I should talk about that on my podcast. And then boom, I'm emotional. Never saw it coming. But you have to view emotions and life experiences like weights. Because imagine, like, pick a weight that would be hard for you to pick up and hold for a set amount of time. Like, let's just say 100 pounds, real easy round number. So you pick up 100 pounds, you hold it for a few seconds, and you drop it. You can barely do it. If you knew picking up this 100-pound weight was going to be a part of your life, like a part of your regular life, you'd probably start picking it up more often, right? You lift it enough so that when you hold the weight, you can hold it longer than you did before. And then more importantly, when you lift it frequently, you're trying to avoid the soreness that comes after. You want to be able to lift that weight, hold on to it, let it go, and it doesn't ruin your day. You don't need a nap. You don't need rest to recover from the soreness. You're just able to lift it because you've done it through repetition, and now you can just lift that weight, hold it. It doesn't bother you anymore. You can drop it and go on about your day. You're not like, holy shit, my arm's gassed. Now I can't do anything. The soreness of lifting that weight is like the emotions that come through a life experience. The crying, the feeling depressed, not being able to do anything for the rest of your day because of the anger, the resentment, the shitty feelings that emotion or that experiences creates within you. And I felt that hard when I talked about that on my podcast. Again, I had no idea that was going to come up. It completely caught me off guard. And I almost considered deleting it multiple times. I was like, this is so embarrassing. This is a story from my childhood where I get my ass kicked by 2 girls, and then I talked about it publicly where I'm obviously emotional. Like, why did I do this? What was the point of it? But I realized the importance of facing that. Like, I had to think about it. I had to bring that emotion, like, really just look at it, come to terms with it, get emotional, dwell in that until it lost its effect. I had to just face it head on. The first time I talked about it, I was emotional. I was crying. I was like, what the fuck? This happened 2 decades ago. What's wrong with me? Until I realized that's a weight that was just sitting in the corner of my house. I never picked it up. I never even looked at it. I had no idea how heavy it was. Until Justin Wren on Joe Rogan says he got bullied, and I decide, well, there's my material for today. And then I pull off all the shit that's covering that weight. I pick it up and realize, holy shit, I can't even begin to manage this weight. I've never looked at it. If you never embrace that 100-pound weight, you'll never be able to reconcile it. You'll never be able to come to terms with what happened. This is one big issue I have with things like safe spaces. People say, well, I have this traumatic experience, and because of that, they push their problem onto the external. The rest of the world now has to cater to this bad experience that I had, rather than them saying, okay, I need to learn how to deal with this experience so that when I go out into the world, I'm not just caving. I'm not just falling apart. I'm not just an emotional wreck. Now, obviously, there's some context to this. If somebody's dog just died yesterday, they come over to my house, I'm not going to start making jokes about dead dogs. Like, I'm cognizant of that. But eventually, you have to learn how to deal with that. You can't be 10, 20, 30 years down the line saying, hey, can we just not talk about dogs? My dog died 2 decades ago, and it still is, really hard for me to deal with. No, eventually, you have to, learn how to get past that. So that's one big issue I have with things like safe spaces. It removes the responsibility of the person to deal with shit that happened in their life, and instead says, you know what, I can just push this onto other people. They can now alter their behavior and not act in a way that makes me feel safe, that protects me from ever having these thoughts come back into my head. The most important part about addressing this, about dwelling in that emotion, in this specific context, was that I realized why I was frustrated by it, why it had an effect on me today. And the reason it had an effect on me was, the biggest reason was that I never approached the issue. I never looked at it. I never acknowledged it. But in my case, I realized I was basically emotional for no reason. It was just pure embarrassment of the circumstances. Reliving that experience, I realized I wasn't acting in the way I normally would have acted. If I wasn't thinking about consequences, if I wasn't thinking about what my parents would do or what my teachers would do, if I'd acted the way I would have acted naturally, I would have physically attacked them in self-defense. But I didn't, because society says don't hit girls. They don't say don't hit girls unless they hit you first. They just say don't hit girls. So when they started attacking me, I had that line playing in my head, and I thought, oh shit, I can't fight back. I just have to let this happen. And because of that, I suffered all the embarrassment that followed. You got your ass kicked by 2 girls. But now I just realized, wait, why would I be pissed about that? I acted in a way I wouldn't normally act because of how I thought I should act, because of what other people told me when I was an 11-year-old boy. So once I just held that weight and dwelled in it and really just embraced it, I realized, why the fuck should I cry about this?